The sun blazed over the dusty auction yard, casting long, shimmering rays across the wooden fences that framed the bustling scene. Horses paraded through the main lot, their coats gleaming in the light as eager buyers surveyed them. The crowd, a mix of seasoned ranchers and ambitious young bidders, moved confidently between the pens. Polished boots clacked against the dry earth, and whispered negotiations filled the air, punctuated by the restless shuffling of hooves and the clink of metal gates. Near the front, murmurs rippled as a magnificent black stallion entered the arena. "Look at that muscle," someone muttered, scribbling in a notepad. "That one's got real power," another agreed, leaning over the rail for a closer look. But far from the excitement, in the shadow of the back fence, a lone horse stood in near silence. His coat, once a pale golden brown, was now dull and patchy. His ribs pressed sharply against his skin, and his legs trembled slightly under his weight. If not for the occasional flick of his ear, he might have been mistaken for a statue. Most passed by without sparing him a glance. A few scoffed. "Poor thing's better off sent straight to the slaughterhouse," one man said, shaking his head. "Wouldn't pull a cart, let alone carry a rider," another added with a snicker. Through the crowd, a young woman weaved her way forward. Lena Rivers, her auburn hair tied back in a simple braid, wore worn denim jeans and a faded shirt. The scuffed leather boots on her feet had seen countless hours on the family ranch. Slung across her shoulder was a weathered satchel. Inside it lay the savings she had scraped together through hard labor. Her sharp, observant eyes skimmed the horses parading under the bright sun, yet none seemed to hold her interest. Her grandfather's words echoed softly in her mind. "The finest ones aren't always the most beautiful, Lena. Look beyond what you see." Her steps slowed as she approached the far end of the auction yard. There, in the forgotten corner, her gaze settled on the frail horse. His stillness, his quiet acceptance of neglect, tugged at something deep inside her. Lena rested her hands gently on the rough wooden fence. "What are you doing here, old boy?" she whispered. The horse's head lifted slightly, his tired eyes locking with hers. In that brief moment, something passed between them, not pity, but recognition. A low voice behind her broke the silence. "What's caught your eye about that sack of bones?" It was Harland Reese, an older rancher known for his sharp tongue. He leaned casually against the fence, his eyes glinting with amusement. "That's none of your business," Lena replied coolly, not shifting her gaze from the horse. Harland chuckled. "Suit yourself, but don't say I didn't warn you." Ignoring him, Lena extended her hand cautiously toward the horse. He flinched, but didn't retreat. His nostrils flared as he leaned forward, brushing his nose softly against her fingertips. It was enough. When the auctioneer finally stepped up, his tone lacked the enthusiasm he had displayed for the other horses. "All right, folks, here we have a young gelding. Needs a bit of care. Maybe someone's got a use for him?" The crowd was silent. A few heads shook. Somewhere, someone stifled a laugh. "I'll take him." Lena's voice rang out clearly, cutting through the stillness. Heads snapped in her direction, stunned by her declaration. Harlan chuckled under his breath. "You've got to be joking. What are you going to do with him? He's not worth the feed you'll waste." But Lena ignored the murmurs and made her way directly to the auctioneer. "What's the price?" she asked firmly. The auctioneer blinked, seemingly caught off guard. "Not much," he admitted with a shrug. "Pay the minimum and he's yours." Without hesitation, Lena handed over the crumpled bills from her satchel. "Sold," the auctioneer called, almost relieved. Taking the lead rope in her hands, Lena stepped up to the gate, gently guiding the horse forward. "You're safe now," she whispered. "Let's get you home." As they passed the crowd, whispers trailed after her. "She's wasting her money. That horse'll never amount to anything." But Lena didn't care. She walked beside her new companion with quiet resolve, the midday sun casting long shadows behind them. Somewhere deep down, she knew this wasn't the end of the story. This was only the beginning. The auctioneer's voice echoed through the fading crowd. "Sold." His tone carried a hint of relief, as if he were glad to be rid of the forgotten horse. Lena Rivers tightened her grip on the worn lead rope, the weight of a dozen skeptical stares pressing down on her. She stepped closer to the gaunt creature at her side, his ribs protruding under his dull coat. "From now on, I'll call you Jasper," she whispered, running her hand softly along his muzzle. Don't worry, boy. No one's gonna turn their back on you again. As she guided Jasper away from the auction, voices followed like shadows. She's wasting her money, someone snorted. That girl's in over her head. Lena didn't flinch. Her focus remained on the horse by her side, every faltering step he took igniting a deeper resolve within her. The trail home stretched long beneath the afternoon sun. Dry grass swayed on either side of the dusty path, and Lena's boots kicked up small clouds of dirt with every step. Jasper's legs trembled with exhaustion, his head hanging low. Easy, boy, Lena murmured, stroking his neck when he stumbled. His sides heaved as if each breath were an effort. Several times she stopped, letting him rest in the shade of scattered oak trees. She crouched beside him, watching as he lapped water from a small leather bucket she had packed. His thin body bore the scars of neglect, but Lena saw something deeper, a quiet strength buried beneath the frailty. She exhaled softly, brushing strands of hair away from her face. You'll never feel like this again, she promised. I'll make sure of it. The sun hung low on the horizon when Lena finally led Jasper through the creaky wooden gate of the Riverside Ranch. The place wasn't much, a modest house of weathered pine and a small stable out back. Beyond the corral stretched acres of untamed pasture, the grass golden in the fading light. On the porch, Lena's grandfather, Samuel Rivers, sat sharpening an old tool. His silver hair glistened faintly in the glow of sunset. As Lena approached, he set the blade aside, squinting at the thin horse trailing behind her. What's this you've brought home? He asked, straightening with a grunt, his voice laced with both curiosity and caution. Lena stopped a few steps from the porch, brushing Jasper's mane with absent fingers. He's mine now, Grandpa, she said firmly, though nervousness flickered in her eyes. I bought him at the auction. Samuel rose, his weathered hands resting on his hips as he took slow, deliberate steps toward them. He circled the horse, his gaze sharp and assessing. Jasper barely lifted his head, his exhaustion evident. Skin and bones, Samuel muttered, shaking his head. He hasn't seen a good meal in months. I know, Lena admitted, standing tall under his scrutiny, but I think he can recover. He just needs time, care, and someone who believes in him. Samuel raised an eyebrow, folding his arms. Time and care don't come cheap, girl. You sure about this? A horse like this needs more than just good intentions. I'm sure, Lena said without hesitation. For a long moment, Samuel studied her in silence, reading the determination etched into her features. Finally, he sighed, nodding slowly. All right, he said, his voice softening. If you're set on it, he's your responsibility now. Feed him, train him, and prove he's worth it. A grin broke across Lena's face, relief and gratitude spilling out. Thank you, Grandpa. I won't let you down. Samuel motioned toward the corral. Put him in the small paddock for the night. Tomorrow, we'll figure out a better setup. Lena led Jasper into the fenced area where she had hastily arranged a makeshift shelter. The ground was bare, but a pile of hay waited in the corner, along with a trough of water. As she untied the lead rope, Jasper hesitated at the gate, his dark eyes scanning the unfamiliar surroundings. He didn't move right away. Instead, he turned his head toward Lena, holding her gaze in the soft twilight. She crouched beside the trough, dipping a bucket into the fresh water. Here you go, boy. You've earned this. Jasper lowered his head and drank deeply, his tense body slowly relaxing with each gulp. Lena leaned back against the corral fence, watching him in silence as the first stars flickered above. A gentle creak signaled Samuel's return. He leaned over the fence, his eyes softening as he watched his granddaughter sitting cross-legged by the horse. Maybe you're right about him, girl, Samuel murmured, barely audible. Maybe he just needed someone to see past what's on the outside. Jasper finished drinking, stepping closer to Lena with a quiet nicker, as if agreeing. The road ahead would be long, Lena knew that. But as she sat beneath the blanket of stars, Jasper standing protectively nearby, she felt a flicker of hope take root. Somewhere deep in her heart, she knew that this was only the start of something extraordinary. Jasper drank eagerly, his thin frame visibly relaxing with each gulp of water. As Lena sat cross-legged in the dirt beside him, she placed a pile of hay nearby, watching intently as he began to eat. It wasn't until she saw him in the fading light that she truly understood how frail he was. His ribs pressed sharply against his sides, and his coat, dull and rough, barely caught the glow of the moon. But there was something else, something no one at the auction had noticed. Despite the weakness in his body, the way Jasper held his head high, scanning the world around him, spoke of a quiet resilience that hadn't yet been extinguished. Later that evening, Samuel stepped onto the porch, his weathered boots crunching softly against the gravel as he approached the corral. He stopped at the fence, leaning forward to take in the scene before him. There was Lena, asleep at the base of the wooden post, her head tucked into her arms. Jasper stood nearby, his ears turned slightly forward as though keeping watch over her. Samuel allowed himself a small, knowing smile. "Maybe you're right about him, girl," he murmured, his voice just a whisper on the wind. With that, he turned and headed back inside, leaving them beneath the soft blanket of stars. That night marked the beginning of something new, a quiet bond that was just beginning to form between Lena and Jasper. The road ahead would be long and uncertain, but the trust slowly growing between them would become the foundation of whatever lay ahead. The following weeks tested Lena in ways she hadn't expected. Jasper's condition was worse than she had realized, and every day felt like an uphill battle to rebuild his strength. Although food and water were now plentiful, Jasper ate sparingly, as if he no longer trusted there would be more tomorrow. Lena woke at dawn each day, carefully inspecting the hay and adding supplements to boost his nutrition. She spoke to him often, her voice low and steady as she sat beside him. Jasper would flick his ears in her direction, watching her with quiet curiosity. "You're not in competition anymore," she reassured him one morning, rubbing his neck softly. "This is your time to rest. We're going to take it one step at a time." But the first real challenge came sooner than Lena expected. A few days after Jasper's arrival, Lena decided to lead him to the larger paddock. She hoped the open space would give him a chance to stretch his legs and rediscover his strength. But as she tugged gently on the lead rope, Jasper froze. His body stiffened, and his eyes filled with something Lena hadn't seen before: fear. It was as though he believed the next step would lead him somewhere dark and unfamiliar. "Easy, boy," she whispered, loosening her grip but keeping the lead firmly in her hand. "I'm right here." From the porch, Samuel watched the scene unfold, leaning lightly on his old walking stick. He remained silent for a while before finally speaking. "That horse is hurt inside," he said, his voice heavy with quiet certainty. "Not just his body, someone broke him somewhere along the way." Lena glanced back, her hand still gently pressed against Jasper's shoulder. "Then we'll fix him, Grandpa," she replied softly. "But we'll do it his way." That day, she let go of the lead and simply sat down beside him near the gate. Jasper remained still, his muscles tense and coiled like springs. Time passed in near silence, broken only by the soft hum of the wind and the distant calls of birds. Jasper didn't move forward, but he didn't step back either. For Lena, that was enough. The next day they tried again, and the day after that. Each time Jasper hesitated at the gate, Lena waited patiently, and slowly, step by step, he began to inch forward. On the third afternoon, he crossed the threshold into the paddock. Lena exhaled softly, brushing her hand along his neck with a smile. "I knew you could do it," she whispered. Building Jasper's strength proved to be as much of a mental task as it was physical. Though he could barely manage more than a slow walk at first, Lena designed careful routines to help him grow stronger. She led him around the corral, ensuring the sessions were short but consistent. Gradually, she introduced brief trots, but never pushed him too far. Some days, progress seemed tangible. On others, it felt like Jasper was slipping backward. But no matter the setback, Lena saw the same flicker of determination in his eyes, a glimmer that refused to go out. Even Samuel, who had once expressed doubt, noticed the change. "He doesn't give up, does he?" Samuel remarked one morning as he leaned against the fence. Lena smiled, running her hand along Jasper's mane. "No, Grandpa, he doesn't, and neither would she." As the days passed, Samuel began to take quiet interest in Jasper's progress. Though he had initially held reservations, he watched Lena work with the horse, offering quiet bits of advice drawn from decades of experience. "Don't rush him," Samuel said one afternoon, leaning against the fence as Lena guided Jasper around the corral. "Strength isn't just in the legs, girl. A horse needs to trust you in his mind too. If he does, he'll go places no one thought possible." Later that day, as Lena brushed Jasper down after their session, Samuel approached carrying an old, worn wooden brush. "Need a hand?" he asked, holding it out. Lena grinned, brushing the dust from her hands. "Sure, Grandpa." As she worked Jasper's back, Samuel began brushing along his neck with slow, steady strokes. At first, the horse stiffened under the touch of the unfamiliar hand, his muscles tensing beneath his fragile coat. "Easy now," Samuel whispered as he continued his careful rhythm. Gradually, Jasper's rigid frame began to relax, his eyes softening. Samuel chuckled quietly after a few minutes. "Funny thing, this one reminds me of a horse I had when I was young, just as stubborn, just as wary." Lena paused, glancing at her grandfather. "What happened to him?" Samuel's gaze grew distant, his features softening with memory. "He became the best horse I ever had, but only because I gave him the time he needed. Never rush a horse, Lena. They'll teach you patience if you let them. And if you listen, they'll give back more than you'd expect." Later that evening, Lena sat alone by the corral, watching Jasper graze under the moonlight. Samuel's words echoed in her mind, stirring a quiet certainty in her heart. There was something special about Jasper, something no one else had cared to see. In the months that followed, her dedication transformed him. His once fragile frame grew strong, lean muscles filling the spaces where bones once jutted out. Jasper's coat, dull and patchy at first, began to shine in the sun, rich and dark. His movements shifted from hesitant and stiff to fluid, graceful strides. But more than his appearance, it was the change in his eyes that meant the most to Lena. Where there had once been resignation, there now flickered trust and a quiet determination. One afternoon, as Lena led Jasper around the corral, Samuel appeared with a length of rope and an old saddle draped over his arm. The leather was cracked but sturdy and bore the marks of years of use. "It's time this one knows what it feels like to carry a rider," Samuel said, his tone a mix of pride and challenge. Lena glanced at Jasper, who stood grazing lazily in the soft light. Though they had come far, she hesitated. Riding him was the next big step, a delicate balance between progress and trust. "Do you think he's ready?" Lena asked, running her hand gently along Jasper's mane. Samuel set the saddle against the fence, nodding. "We won't know until we try. But if anyone can do it, it's you. He trusts you, Lena." That night, Lena lay awake, staring at the ceiling as plans and questions swirled in her mind. Ever since she had brought Jasper home, she had dreamed of something more. Not for the glory of competitions, but to show the world that a horse's worth couldn't be measured by appearance or pedigree. But she knew better than to rush. The next morning at sunrise, Lena brought Jasper to the corral. The saddle waited in the corner, worn but ready. She approached carefully, her hands steady but patient. "All right, boy," she whispered, running her palm along his neck. "Let's take this slow." She let Jasper sniff the saddle, allowing him to familiarize himself with its presence. His nostrils flared, his eyes curious but calm. Slowly, Lena lifted the saddle, resting it gently on his back without fastening the straps. Jasper stiffened, his head craning to examine the unfamiliar weight pressing against him. "You're all right," Lena murmured, running her hand along his side. "It's just me." Her calm voice seemed to settle him. After a few moments, his shoulders eased, and he stood quietly beneath the saddle. Samuel watched from the edge of the corral, nodding approvingly. As the morning wore on, Lena gradually secured the saddle. She walked Jasper in slow circles around the enclosure, letting him adjust to the feel of the weight. His steps were awkward at first, stumbling occasionally, but as the sun climbed higher, Jasper's movements grew more natural. Samuel stepped into the corral, his walking stick tapping softly against the ground. "All right, girl, let's see how he handles it when you're up there." Lena exhaled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Okay, boy," she whispered, standing beside Jasper. "Let's give this a try." She slid her foot into the stirrup, pausing briefly as Jasper shifted beneath her. With slow, deliberate movements, she pulled herself up, settling gently into the saddle. Jasper froze, his muscles tensing once again. "You're all right," Lena soothed, stroking his neck from her seat. "I'm right here." For a long moment, he stood perfectly still. Then, as if understanding her trust, he let out a deep breath and took a tentative step forward. Samuel's smile was subtle, but unmistakable. "See, I told you, he wasn't broken. He just needed someone to show him what he's capable of." As Lena settled into the saddle, Jasper froze beneath her. His muscles tensed, his ears flicking back uncertainly, as if unsure of what to make of the weight on his back. Lena remained perfectly still, her hands light on the reins, giving him the time he needed to adjust. "That's it, boy," she whispered, stroking his neck gently. "You're doing great." A long breath escaped Jasper's nostrils, and slowly he took his first cautious steps forward. His hooves pressed lightly into the dirt, hesitant at first, but with each lap around the corral, his stride began to smooth out. From his usual spot at the fence, Samuel watched with quiet satisfaction. "See what I told you?" he said, a glint of pride in his eyes. He wasn't broken. He just needed someone to remind him of what he could do. That day marked a turning point for both Lena and Jasper. With the saddle no longer a barrier between them, their training deepened. Jasper's newfound confidence opened doors Lena hadn't dared to imagine before. Now came the next challenge, preparing him for competition. Lena knew that equestrian events like show jumping required not only strength and precision, but an unshakable bond between horse and rider. The competitions demanded discipline, but more importantly, trust. Weeks later, she decided it was time to take Jasper beyond the familiarity of Riverside Ranch. The nearby open fields offered wide, rolling stretches of land and new experiences. Lena hoped it would help Jasper adjust to different environments and unexpected sounds. The first outing didn't go as smoothly as planned. The rustling of leaves in the wind startled Jasper, and the snap of twigs beneath his hooves sent him skittering. At one point, he bolted, nearly unseating Lena. "Easy," she called out, her hands firm but calm on the reins. "I've got you." Her voice seemed to reach him, and slowly Jasper came to a stop, his sides heaving from the sudden burst of energy. Though shaken, Lena dismounted and led him by hand the rest of the way. Despite the setbacks, she refused to give up. Every day, they returned to the fields. Jasper grew more comfortable, learning to trust not only Lena but himself. With each outing, their connection strengthened, becoming unmistakable to anyone who saw them together. One afternoon, as Samuel leaned against the fence watching them, a friend from a neighboring ranch stopped by. "That horse of hers doesn't just have strength," Samuel remarked to his companion, pride flickering in his voice. "He's got heart, and that's all thanks to Lena." The breakthrough finally came during one of their training sessions. Lena had set up a basic jumping course in the corral, a few low rails placed strategically around the enclosure. At first, Jasper knocked over nearly every pole, but Lena was patient. They practiced daily, and little by little, Jasper began to understand. His hooves grew lighter over the rails, his movements more deliberate. Then, one afternoon, it happened. Jasper cleared the entire course without touching a single rail. Lena threw her arms around his neck, unable to contain her excitement. "You did it," she laughed, tears pricking at her eyes. "I knew you could." That night, as Lena sat beneath the stars, gazing out at the open land stretching beyond the ranch, she allowed herself to dream. They were still far from ready for major competitions, but for the first time since that day at the auction, Lena believed Jasper was destined for more. He wasn't just a forgotten horse anymore. Months passed, and the pair continued their tireless training. Jasper's jumps became higher, his movements more fluid, and together they grew into a team that moved as one. But Lena knew the real challenge lay just ahead, stepping into the competitive world. One morning, as Lena sat at the kitchen table reviewing the calendar of upcoming events, Samuel approached with a steaming mug of coffee in hand. "Have you made up your mind yet?" he asked, peering over her shoulder. Lena sighed, setting the schedule down. "There's a small competition next month in town," she admitted. "But I'm not sure we're ready. There's still a lot to work on." Samuel took a long sip from his mug, his gaze steady. "Listen, girl, nobody starts out perfect. If you wait for the right moment, you'll be waiting forever. Jasper's ready. You just need to believe it." Encouraged by his words, Lena signed up for the local event. Though small, it felt monumental. It was their first step into the public eye, and while it wasn't a championship, Lena knew the nerves creeping into her chest wouldn't care. The day of the competition arrived faster than she expected. Lena spent the early morning preparing Jasper, brushing his dark coat until it shone in the sunlight. She checked his saddle twice, ensuring every strap sat perfectly in place. "Ready, boy?" she asked, her hand lingering under his chin. Jasper nickered softly, almost as if he understood the weight of the day ahead. As they entered the arena, the hum of spectators and the blur of horses shifting in their stalls filled the air. Jasper pranced slightly beneath Lena, his ears flicking nervously at the unfamiliar sounds. "It's just me and you," Lena whispered, stroking his neck to calm him. "We've got this." Jasper shifted nervously beneath Lena as they waited near the starting gate, his head tossed restlessly, and every rustle or distant cheer from the crowd made him snort and paw at the ground. "Easy now," Lena whispered, running her hand along his neck. "We're in this together." The arena buzzed with energy. Spectators lined the rails, chatting and pointing toward the competitors. As Lena guided Jasper closer to the course, she felt their eyes drift toward her. "Isn't that the horse no one bid on?" A man near the rail whispered to his friend. "Yeah," the friend replied, chuckling. "Looks like she cleaned him up, but I doubt it'll matter much." Lena's jaw tightened, but she kept her focus on Jasper. The weight of their doubt didn't faze her. She had learned long ago that Jasper's worth wasn't measured by their expectations. Finally, her name echoed over the loudspeaker, and adrenaline surged through her veins. She adjusted the reins, steadying her grip. With practiced ease, she nudged Jasper forward, guiding him into the arena. The course wasn't elaborate, but every obstacle demanded precision and trust. Lena inhaled deeply, patting Jasper's neck. "All right, boy, let's show them." At her cue, Jasper broke into a smooth trot which quickly shifted into a gallop. The first obstacle approached, a low bar that Jasper cleared effortlessly. Lena felt the tension in her chest ease as they approached the second jump, taller and more imposing. For a split second, Jasper hesitated, his muscles coiled beneath her as if uncertain. "You've got this," Lena encouraged softly, leaning forward. Jasper surged forward, soaring over the jump with surprising power. The soft thud of his hooves landing silenced the crowd, their quiet disbelief lingering in the air. Each jump and turn told a story of patience and perseverance. Though not every landing was flawless, their connection was undeniable. As they crossed the finish line, applause erupted from the stands. Lena leaned forward, wrapping her arms around Jasper's neck. Her heart swelled with pride, not because of the crowd's reaction, but because she knew how far they had come. In the shaded rest area, Lena dismounted and loosened Jasper's reins, allowing him to cool down. A tall, lean competitor approached, his eyes lingering on Jasper with curiosity. "Is this the same horse I saw at that auction a few months back?" the young man asked, brushing sweat from his brow. Lena smiled, running her hand along Jasper's mane. "He is. His name's Jasper." The rider, Nate Walker, let out a low whistle. "You've done something amazing. That horse has a spark, and so do you." "Thanks, Nate," Lena replied, brushing off the praise but feeling warmth creep in her chest. When the results were announced, Lena wasn't expecting to place, but to her surprise, they secured third. As she accepted the bronze medal, she realized this journey had become more than about proving Jasper's worth. It was about the bond they had built, one jump at a time. That evening, as they rode back to the ranch, Samuel was waiting on the porch. His gaze softened as he watched them approach, his eyes reflecting quiet pride. "I knew you could do it," he said as Lena dismounted. "But this is just the beginning." Lena smiled, glancing at Jasper. "I know, Grandpa, and we're ready for whatever comes next." With their first competition behind them, the road ahead seemed clearer. In the following days, the pride of their achievement lingered, but so did the realization that attention was beginning to grow. Lena hadn't anticipated the ripple effect. One crisp morning, while she brushed Jasper in the barn, Samuel appeared holding an envelope. "This one's for you, girl," he said with a glint in his eye. Looks like someone was impressed. Lena wiped her hands on her jeans and took the letter, curiosity prickling at her. Inside was an invitation to a regional show jumping event, a step above the small-town competition they had just entered. A handwritten note was tucked inside. "Your dedication and bond with Jasper caught our attention. We believe he holds remarkable potential. It would be an honor to have you both participate." Lena's breath caught as she reread the note. Competing at a higher level felt thrilling, but also daunting. "What do you think, Grandpa?" she asked, holding out the letter. Samuel studied the paper for a moment before nodding thoughtfully. "I think this is the next step for you. But be ready, Lena. The higher you climb, the more people will be watching, and not all of them will want to see you succeed. Lena tightened her grip on the invitation, nerves flickering beneath her excitement. I understand, but we're not stopping now. Determined to rise to the challenge, Lena decided to bring in someone who could help them sharpen their skills. She hired Marcus Flynn, a seasoned trainer known for his experience with competitive horses. Marcus wasn't the warmest man, but his eye for detail was sharp, and he wasted no time identifying both their strengths and weaknesses. You've got a special horse here, Marcus remarked during one of their sessions. But he's not like the others. He's got a wild spirit. Don't break that. It's what makes him exceptional. Lena nodded, grateful for the advice. She knew Jasper wasn't just any horse. He was something rare, and she wouldn't trade that for anything. As the regional competition loomed closer, Lena and Jasper trained harder than ever, ready to take the next step, together. Lena knew she needed guidance to take Jasper to the next level. She hired Luke Harrington, a no-nonsense trainer with years of competition experience. Luke's sharp eye and straightforward approach quickly earned Lena's trust. One afternoon, as they wrapped up a session, Luke leaned on the rail, watching Jasper canter across the corral. That horse has heart, he remarked, nodding in approval. But he's got a wild spirit too. That's something rare. Just make sure he never loses the trust he has in you. That's what makes him exceptional. Lena smiled, patting Jasper's neck. I won't let that happen. The day of the regional competition arrived faster than Lena expected. The venue was grand, towering stands filled with spectators and rows of meticulously groomed horses waiting to compete. Despite the buzz of the crowd, Jasper appeared calm, his stance steady as his ears flicked forward, attuned to Lena's every move. As she led him through warm-ups, Lena caught sight of a group of men standing at the far end of the arena. At first, she paid little attention, but then recognition struck. One of them was the auctioneer from the day she had bought Jasper. Is that the horse no one wanted? One of the men asked, his tone laced with disbelief. Looks like it. Another replied, chuckling. Seems the girl saw something the rest of us missed. Lena kept her focus on Jasper, brushing the words aside. But just before she entered the arena, one of the men from the group approached her. He was broad-shouldered, with the air of someone who rarely took no for an answer. His confidence practically radiated as he walked toward her. Excuse me, miss, he said, his voice smooth but self-assured. I'm Ethan Morgan. I remember you from that auction a few months ago. I'll admit, I didn't think much of that horse back then, but you've proven me wrong. Impressive work. Lena gave a polite nod but kept her guard up. Thank you. Ethan smiled, though there was a glint in his eye. Actually, I wanted to make you an offer. I'm willing to buy him from you, for a significant sum. What do you say? Lena's grip on Jasper's reins tightened as she met Ethan's gaze. He's not for sale. Jasper isn't just a horse to me, he's my partner. Ethan's smirk didn't falter. I understand that, but think about it. I could offer more than you'd make at any competition. You could invest in a horse with a stronger pedigree, one that could take you to the top. Jasper shifted slightly, sensing Lena's tension. She ran a calming hand along his neck, feeling his muscles tense beneath her touch. No amount of money will buy what we've built, Lena replied firmly. Jasper stays with me. Ethan raised an eyebrow but shrugged. Suit yourself. But remember, horses like that don't come around often. Don't let his potential go to waste. As he walked away, Lena felt pride swell in her chest, though frustration simmered beneath it. She knew others would question her decision, but Jasper's worth wasn't measured in dollars. When their turn finally arrived, Lena and Jasper entered the arena with quiet confidence. The course was more challenging than anything they had faced, with tight turns and high jumps designed to test even the most seasoned competitors. But Lena's faith in Jasper never wavered. At her signal, Jasper surged forward. They cleared the first jump with ease, and as they approached the second, a towering double rail, Lena felt Jasper hesitate for a brief moment. You've got this, she whispered, leaning into him. Jasper responded, his hooves leaving the ground as they soared over the jump. The crowd fell silent, watching as the pair moved in sync through each obstacle, their bond almost palpable. When they crossed the finish line, the audience erupted in applause. Though they didn't take first place, their second-place finish was nothing short of remarkable. But for Lena, the true victory wasn't the silver trophy. It was the knowledge that she and Jasper had faced every challenge together, proving their worth to anyone who doubted them. That evening, as they rode back toward the ranch, Lena's thoughts swirled with everything that had happened. Success, she realized, had brought not only recognition but also the attention of people like Ethan, people who saw Jasper as an investment rather than a companion. Samuel was waiting on the porch when they arrived, his expression warm and filled with pride. "I knew you two could do it," he said with a nod. "But this is just the beginning." Lena smiled, glancing at Jasper. "I know, Grandpa, and we're ready for whatever comes next." The road ahead stretched wide and uncertain, but Lena and Jasper were prepared to face it, together. The story of Lena and Jasper had begun to ripple through equestrian circles. Some found their journey inspiring, while others remained skeptical, dismissing their success as luck. One afternoon, as Lena guided Jasper through the corral during training, the distant hum of an approaching vehicle caught her attention. A sleek black car, gleaming under the midday sun, rolled to a stop at the ranch's entrance. Its polished surface looked out of place against the weathered fences and dusty paddocks. From the car stepped a tall man in an impeccably tailored suit. His sharp, refined appearance clashed starkly with the rustic ranch that sprawled behind Lena. "Lena Rivers," he called out, his tone calm but authoritative. Lena dismounted, patting Jasper's side as she led him toward the fence, curiosity flickering in her eyes. "That's me. How can I help you?" The man approached, extending a business card from his jacket. "My name is Ethan Morgan. I represent one of the leading horse breeding and training establishments in the country. I've been following your progress in the competitions, and I must say, I'm impressed. Your horse, Jasper, is exceptional." Lena accepted the card cautiously, glancing at the embossed lettering. "Thank you," she said, though her voice carried a subtle edge of hesitation. "We've worked hard to get this far." Ethan smiled, though the gesture seemed calculated, as if it served more as a formality than genuine warmth. "That much is clear," he replied smoothly, "which is exactly why I'm here." He slipped his hands into his pockets, his gaze shifting toward Jasper. "My client is interested in acquiring him. We're prepared to offer a substantial sum, more than any prize you'd win in competition." Lena's chest tightened. She had heard similar offers before, but this time, the man's polished demeanor and confident delivery unsettled her. "He's not for sale," Lena replied firmly, her hand instinctively resting against Jasper's neck. Ethan didn't flinch. "I understand your attachment," he said, his voice laced with the patience of a seasoned negotiator. "But consider what you could achieve with that kind of money. You could purchase a horse with the finest pedigree, one that could elevate you to the top tier of the sport." Lena stepped closer to Jasper, placing herself subtly between him and Ethan, as though shielding him from the man's words. "Mr. Morgan, I don't think you understand. Jasper isn't just a competition horse. He's my partner, my friend. Everything we've accomplished, we've done together. No amount of money can replace that." For a long moment, Ethan studied her, his expression unreadable. Then he shrugged, a faint smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. "It's a pity," he said, with a condescending note that prickled at Lena's pride. "But let me give you some advice. Emotions won't take you far in this world. Greatness comes at a cost, and one day you'll have to decide if you're willing to pay it." Without waiting for her response, Ethan turned and strode back to his car, the crunch of gravel under his shoes the only sound as he left. Lena watched the car disappear down the road, frustration bubbling in her chest. She glanced at Jasper, who stood calmly by her side, as if sensing the weight of the exchange. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Lena recounted the encounter to Samuel, who leaned quietly on a shovel by the barn. "Men like that always show up when they see something that shines," Samuel said after a moment, his voice steady but thoughtful. "But the real question, Lena, is why you're doing this. If it's glory you're after, they might sway you someday. But if it's something more, no offer will make you waver." Lena gazed toward the pasture, watching Jasper graze peacefully in the fading light. A soft smile tugged at her lips as memories surfaced. Memories of the frail, overlooked horse she had brought home from the auction. I'm not in this for trophies, Grandpa, Lena finally said, her voice unwavering. I want to show that courage isn't about what others see. Jasper deserves to shine, not for them, but for himself. Samuel nodded, pride gleaming in his eyes. Then keep going, girl. But remember, success has its price. The higher you climb, the more they'll try to bring you down. Lena knew he was right. As their reputation grew, so would the challenges. But no matter the cost, she was determined to protect what they had built. With that resolve, Lena and Jasper's training intensified, every step preparing them for the upcoming National Show Jumping Championship. This wasn't just another event. It was a chance to compete against the best riders in the country. But for Lena, the greatest satisfaction wasn't winning. It was proving, time and time again, that Jasper was far more than anyone had given him credit for. He wasn't just a competitor. He was a champion. In spirit, if not yet in title. The morning of the National Show Jumping Championship arrived crisp and electric, the air buzzing with excitement. For Lena, this wasn't just another competition. It was a chance to prove that she and Jasper belonged among the best. The venue stretched out before her like a stage, grandstands packed with spectators. The warm-up ring was filled with pristine horses and riders whose experience showed in the way they carried themselves. Confidence radiated from them as they prepared. Samuel's hand rested gently on Lena's shoulder as they gazed out over the course. You ready for this, girl? He asked, his voice low but steady. Lena glanced at Jasper. Despite the bustle around him, he stood calm and alert, his ears twitching at the distant hum of voices. We're ready, Grandpa. No matter what happens, we'll face it together. The competition was divided into 2 rounds. The first, a series of medium-height jumps, would narrow the field. The second, far more technical and demanding, would decide the winners. Lena knew that if they wanted to advance, perfection was the only option. When her number was called, a hush settled over the crowd, replaced by soft murmurs. Isn't that the girl with the horse from the auction? Someone whispered. Yeah, but there's no way they'll make it through this, another replied, barely concealing their doubt. Lena climbed into the saddle and praying to both, adjusting the reins as she guided Jasper to the starting line. The arena grew quiet as they took their positions. Lena leaned forward, brushing her hand along Jasper's neck. Let's show them what we can do, she murmured. The whistle blew. Jasper surged forward in a smooth, powerful gallop, his hooves thundering against the ground. The first obstacle, an imposing triple jump, loomed ahead. With effortless grace, Jasper cleared it, landing lightly on the other side. A ripple of applause echoed from the stands. Obstacle after obstacle followed, each conquered with fluid precision. Lena's heart pounded as she guided Jasper around tight turns and over towering rails. Their training, trust, and countless hours of dedication shone through with every leap. By the time they crossed the finish line without a single fault, the crowd erupted in cheers. Rider 62, Lena Rivers and her horse Jasper, qualify for the second round with an outstanding time, the announcer declared. Lena exhaled deeply, grinning as she leaned down to stroke Jasper's mane. We did it, boy. We really did it. Back in the resting area, the weight of competing at this level settled in. Some riders glanced at her with curiosity, others with skepticism. Among the crowd, Nate Walker approached, his smile genuine. I knew you had something special, but that was incredible, he said, offering a handshake. Thanks, Nate, Lena replied, modestly scratching Jasper behind the ears. But he deserves the credit, not me. Nate laughed. I think you both deserve it. The second round loomed larger and more daunting. The course was tighter, the jumps higher, and the combinations more complex. Lena watched as rider after rider tackled the course, each showcasing polished skill and experience. When her number was called once more, the weight of the moment pressed down on her. The stands grew silent, and she felt every gaze settle on her. Judges, spectators, and fellow competitors. But as she mounted Jasper, Lena grounded herself in the connection they shared. It's just you and me, she whispered. Let's finish this the way we started. The second course proved unforgiving. At the third obstacle, a zigzag combination designed to force quick adjustments, Jasper hesitated, momentarily unsure. Easy, Lena soothed, guiding him gently with her hands. With a soft exhale, Jasper found his rhythm, clearing the obstacle without touching a rail. The final challenge was a towering double jump, meant to test even the most seasoned competitors. Lena could feel the tension in the air as they approached. Jasper's gallop quickened, his muscles coiling beneath her as they approached the jump. "Let's go, boy," she whispered. With a surge of power, Jasper leaped, clearing the double jump with room to spare. They landed gracefully, and the arena erupted in applause. Lena leaned down, whispering softly into Jasper's ear as they slowed to a trot. "Thank you," she breathed, running her hand along his mane. The announcer's voice rang out. Lena Rivers and Jasper finished with the second fastest time in the competition. At the awards ceremony, Lena stood proudly beside Jasper as they received the silver medal. Though it wasn't gold, the achievement felt monumental. For Lena, the real victory lay in the bond she and Jasper had forged. From the stands, Samuel beamed with pride, his eyes twinkling. Nate clapped enthusiastically, cheering them on. But as Lena scanned the crowd, her gaze landed on a familiar figure. Ethan Morgan, standing off to the side, his expression unreadable. Beside him stood another familiar face, the auctioneer from months ago. Both men watched silently, their expressions flickering between astonishment and something Lena couldn't quite place. As the ceremony concluded, Lena stood tall, her hand resting gently on Jasper's neck. "Let them watch," she whispered with a smile. She knew one thing with certainty: this was only the beginning. As Lena clutched the silver medal in her hand, a quiet determination settled over her. She whispered softly to Jasper, "This is just the beginning. We'll go even further, together." That night, back at Riverside Ranch, Lena and Samuel sat on the porch, gazing up at the stars. There was no grand celebration, only the peaceful satisfaction of knowing how far they had come. For Lena, success wasn't measured by medals or trophies, but by the bond she and Jasper shared, a connection no award could ever surpass. Months after the national championship, Lena and Jasper's names had become well known in equestrian circles. Their story spread far and wide, inspiring others, especially those who believed in second chances. But with recognition came attention Lena hadn't anticipated. One crisp morning, as she led Jasper through their usual training routine, Samuel emerged from the house, his expression tense. In his hand, he held a newspaper, its front page glaring in the sunlight. "Lena, you need to see this," he called, his voice edged with concern. Lena slowed Jasper to a halt, hopping off and taking the paper from Samuel's outstretched hand. Her eyes locked onto the bold headline, accompanied by a photo of her and Jasper mid-jump at the championship. "The rejected horse, the champion no one saw coming." The article recounted their rise in the competitive world, but it wasn't just a celebration of their success. It highlighted Jasper's near dismissal at the auction, exposing the ridicule he had faced and how wealthy buyers were now offering staggering sums to purchase him. "They can't be serious," Lena muttered, irritation rising. "Believe it," Samuel replied gravely. "Ever since that silver medal, everyone's got their eyes on you, and Jasper." Before Lena could respond, the low hum of a car echoed from the entrance. She turned to see a sleek black vehicle pulling up, its polished exterior glaring against the ranch's earthy backdrop. 3 sharply dressed men stepped out, and Lena immediately recognized one of them, Ethan Morgan. Her grip on the reins tightened as she whispered under her breath, "What do they want now?" Samuel, sensing her tension, rested a hand on her shoulder. "Stay calm, girl," he said softly. "Hear them out. But remember, stay true to why you're doing this." Samuel opened the gate, allowing Ethan and his companions to step through. Ethan wasted no time. "Miss Rivers," he began with his usual smooth confidence. "We've met before, but today I bring you a formal proposal. My client is prepared to offer $5 million for your horse. This includes a contract to train at one of the finest facilities in the country." Lena crossed her arms, her expression unyielding. "I've told you before, Jasper is not for sale. Not for 5 million, not for 10. No amount of money will change that." Ethan's smirk barely wavered, though a flicker of surprise crossed his face. "Miss Rivers, this isn't just business. It's an opportunity. Imagine what you could achieve. International competitions, training other horses. Why limit yourself to just one?" Lena stepped forward, her eyes blazing. "Do you know what Jasper means to me? When everyone else dismissed him, I saw who he truly was. A fighter, a champion. Every achievement I've earned has been with him. Not because of his pedigree, but because of his heart. That's something you'll never understand." She gestured toward Jasper, who stood calmly in the corral, his dark eyes fixed on the exchange as if he too understood the moment's weight. Ethan's companions exchanged glances, visibly unsettled by Lena's unwavering resolve. Ethan made one last attempt. "I respect your dedication, but emotions don't win championships, Miss Rivers. 5 million is more money than you'll ever see. Think about your future." Lena took a steadying breath, lifting her chin as she met Ethan's gaze. "Jasper is priceless," she said, her voice firm. "He's my partner, my family. I will never betray him for money. If that's all you came to discuss, I'd appreciate it if you left." Ethan's expression darkened, but he recognized defeat. Without another word, he turned and walked back to the car, his companions following closely behind. As the sound of the engine faded into the distance, Samuel let out a hearty laugh. "That'll give them something to chew on. I doubt they'll be back anytime soon." Lena smiled, though the adrenaline still hummed faintly in her chest. She watched as Jasper trotted freely across the paddock, his mane catching the breeze. Walking over to him, she rested her forehead gently against his, closing her eyes. "I promise to protect you, no matter what happens. We'll always face it together." Jasper let out a soft snort, as if to say he understood. That evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, Lena sat beside Samuel on the porch. The sky blazed with hues of orange and purple. "Do you think I made the right choice?" Lena asked, her gaze lingering on the horizon. Samuel adjusted his hat, his eyes twinkling with pride. "The right decision isn't always the easiest or the most profitable," he said, leaning back in his chair. "But if you can sleep at night knowing you stayed true to what you love, then yeah, you made the right call." Lena nodded, feeling a warmth settle in her chest. Jasper, standing peacefully in the corral, was more than just a champion. He was a reminder that some things couldn't be bought, and that the bond between them was stronger than any price tag. Lena sat quietly on the porch, the cool evening breeze rustling through the ranch. As she gazed at the fading light stretching across the hills, Samuel's words lingered in her mind. "The right decision isn't always the most lucrative," he had said. "But if you can go to bed knowing you didn't betray what you love, then yes, you made the right choice." Lena smiled softly to herself. In her heart, she knew Jasper's worth wasn't tied to the offers she had turned down. It was woven into every moment they had shared, every hurdle they had faced together. Years passed, but the bond between Lena and Jasper only deepened. They didn't win every championship, but their journey became something more, a testament to resilience and belief in second chances. Jasper's reputation grew, not just as a competitor, but as a symbol of hope. His story inspired others to see potential where it had once been overlooked. Whenever Lena told the tale of how she had purchased him at an auction, heads would tilt with curiosity, and eyes would widen with wonder. One peaceful morning, as Lena brushed Jasper under the soft rays of the rising sun, Samuel approached her, carrying an old, worn notebook. Lena looked up, curious. "What's that, Grandpa?" she asked, setting the brush aside. Samuel held it out to her with a gentle smile. "It's something you should start writing in. Your story and Jasper's. Not to brag, but so others can understand what it means to never give up." Lena took the notebook, flipping through the blank pages. "Do you really think anyone would want to read it?" Samuel's eyes gleamed with quiet pride. "Believe me, Lena, this story has the power to change lives." Inspired by her grandfather's words, Lena began writing each night, long after Jasper had settled in his stall. She poured her memories into the pages, detailing the auction, the grueling hours of training, and the moments they had almost given up. But most importantly, she wrote about Jasper's strength, his loyalty, and the way he had taught her that the heart of a champion wasn't defined by pedigree, but by resilience and trust. When the notebook was filled, Lena decided to publish it, titling it, "Jasper, the Horse Nobody Wanted." The book struck a chord not just with horse lovers, but with anyone who had ever felt underestimated. Meanwhile, Jasper enjoyed his days of retirement at the ranch. Though he no longer competed, he still galloped with youthful energy, played in the open paddocks, and welcomed the curious hands of visiting children eager to learn about horses. On one of those visits, a young boy stood at the edge of the paddock, his eyes wide with wonder as he watched Jasper graze beneath the shade of a large oak tree. He turned to Lena, his steps hesitant but filled with curiosity. "Is it true?" he asked softly. "Is that the horse from the book?" Lena knelt beside him, smiling. "It's him," she replied. The boy's gaze shifted back to Jasper. "And no one wanted him before?" Lena nodded, crouching down to meet his eyes. "No one at first," she said gently, "but he was always special. He just needed someone to believe in him." The boy stared at Jasper with admiration before finally running toward him, giggling as his small hands brushed over Jasper's sleek coat. Later that evening, Lena and Samuel sat on the porch, watching the stars stretch across the vast sky. Samuel's movements were slower these days, his hair a little whiter, but the pride in his eyes never dimmed. "You realize what you've done, don't you?" Samuel said, breaking the comfortable silence. "Jasper didn't just change your life, he's changed the lives of so many others." Lena's gaze drifted toward the paddock, where Jasper lay resting under the stars. "He taught me everything, Grandpa," Lena whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't even know if I saved him, or if he saved me." Samuel chuckled softly, his face lined with warmth and understanding. "Maybe it was a little of both," he said. That night, Lena went to bed with a heart full of peace, knowing she had kept the promise she made to Jasper from the very beginning, to stand by him, protect him, and let the world see his true worth. And so, the tale of a forgotten horse, once passed over at an auction, grew into a legend, not just on the track, but in the hearts of everyone who had ever dared to believe in the impossible. Lena's story with Jasper is a powerful reminder that sometimes the most extraordinary things come from the most unexpected places. Her unwavering belief in Jasper when no one else saw his worth transformed not just his life, but hers as well. This story isn't just about winning competitions or proving doubters wrong. It's about resilience, the ability to rise after being overlooked, dismissed, or underestimated. Jasper's journey from the forgotten corner of an auction to standing proudly in the spotlight mirrors the struggles many of us face. Whether we've been rejected, counted out, or told we weren't enough, Lena and Jasper's story shows that with patience, dedication, and a little faith, we can overcome anything. But at its heart, this story is about connection, the kind that can only grow between a person and an animal when trust and love are nurtured over time. Jasper wasn't just a horse to Lena. He was a companion, a confidant, and a reflection of her own perseverance. Perhaps the most beautiful message here is that value isn't always obvious at first glance. We often judge people, animals, and even ourselves based on surface-level traits or circumstances. Lena's story challenges that, reminding us that potential lies within everyone and everything. Sometimes all it takes is one person to recognize it. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Did this story resonate with you as much as it did with me? What part of Lena and Jasper's journey stood out the most? Drop a comment below, and let's share in the inspiration. And if you love stories that touch the heart and remind us of the power of belief, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Let's keep celebrating stories that inspire us to dream big and believe in the impossible.